Welcome to Stop Overthinking, the podcast for overthinkers, people pleasers, and perfectionists who want to feel calm and confident enough to handle whatever life sends your way. I'm your host, Kristen Odegaard, a women's life and mindset coach, lifelong educator, and recovering perfectionist. Hello, welcome to episode 2 of the Stop Overthinking podcast. I'm so glad that you're here with me today. One of the most common complaints or problems that clients bring to me are situations that they didn't want to happen, where they're thinking it's not supposed to be like this. It can be a range of topics, from things like your spouse saying that he's going to partner and split the housework, but it doesn't get done. And then you nag and it might get done, but then he's cranky or you're cranky, and it's just not supposed to be like this. It could be your job that has morphed into 3 full-time roles, and you didn't expect these certain duties, responsibilities. So you might complain or be passive aggressive, but overall you just feel powerless to make this change because it's not supposed to be like this. Maybe it's the parent relationship with you as an adult, and your parent is still treating you like you're 16 years old and tells you what you should be doing and is giving you comments about your house or your cooking or your parenting. And the relationship just shouldn't be like this. All of these are situations that I hear fairly often in the sense of this isn't what I expected. It's not what I want. It's just not supposed to be this way. So it's often a cause of frustration, anger, perhaps even resentment. And it's a really layered topic that can often cover multiple coaching sessions. But today I'm going to try and give you a few actionable steps for you to consider and things that you can do on your own to start moving through when you are thinking about situations like this. So when you're thinking that something is not supposed to be this way, it can be helpful to take time and notice how you think it should be. So let's take the job example. Ask yourself, what should it be like? What kinds of hours? What should the duties be? What should the behavior of your coworkers be like? What should the morale be like? How should your boss behave or your employees behave? What should you be paid? How much time off should you have? What happens when someone is out sick and how does that impact you? Think about all of the ways that you think it should be, simply for your own awareness, because so much of this is just running around in our heads that we're not really even aware of these ideas and beliefs that we hold. So after you take your situation, keep asking why, right? I suggest writing this down. And once you have this on a page, take a look at it and try to be curious. Are you able to detach a bit from the situation and ask yourself and write it down? Where did these thoughts come from? In the case of the job, has it evolved from what you were hired to do? Maybe that your ideas about how other people should behave, where did they come from? What is this based on? Are they stories that you hear from other people? Is it the way that it used to be? Are these ideas in your mind? Is it from watching TV? Who knows? Where did you get this idea of what it should be like? And this is a hard question. Then you need to ask, is this realistic? Is this realistic for right now? Is this realistic for me and the culture and the position that I have? And again, trying to detach a little bit. So it's not about blame. It's not about anger. It's not what about anybody's doing wrong. Just taking a look at where you're at. So here's the deal with how it should be, that it's an idea in our mind. It may or may not be based on reality. Your ideas could be entirely wishful thinking from watching TV shows and hearing about other people's highlight reels. Most of the time, our should is actually harmful to our emotional well-being. And it's because we're clinging to these ideas in our mind. We're overthinking, we're overanalyzing, instead of using that energy to deal with what is actually in front of us. And I know this can be hard to hear. It certainly was for me. But stick with me. We all have shoulds, and I'm saying should like in quotation marks. We all have shoulds about every single thing in our lives, from how people should talk to us, treat us, how other kids should behave, how our cooking should taste, how you should feel at any given time. This is normal. It's what our brains do. Our brains like the certainty of knowing what to expect So it fills in the gaps and it makes it seem certain and familiar to us instead of having to deal with the unknown. But the ideas in our brain aren't necessarily the most helpful based on the situations. They may not be true. They're just guesses a lot of the time, filling in the blank. It's like choosing the letter C on all of the answers of a multiple choice test. So sometimes it's going to work, but half to 3/4 of the time, there's going to be times that it doesn't work. It's just not the right answer. So basically, as we're filling in these gaps, all of these shoulds, it's our brain offering us a suggestion that we have turned into an ideal or a standard of truth because we've never really questioned it. We weren't taught to question it. We don't see other people questioning it. It's just a foreign concept. I like to call all of these rules about how things should be our instruction manual. So think of this instruction manual as the most detailed book, manual, whatever that you can imagine. Like how your car manual, if you've ever opened it up, has, the troubleshooting guides and here's the way it should look and here's what to do if it doesn't happen. And it's very, very detailed. You have this for everything in your life, every situation, every person, every conversation. How your neighbor's yard should look, how other people's kids should behave in Target, how the person driving next to you should be driving or paying attention. You have an instruction manual on how your body should look, on what your husband should do at any given moment. You have an instruction manual on how somebody is supposed to respond to you when you have to call a customer service line, that person should be helpful and friendly. And when these things don't get followed, it creates frustration, anger, disappointment. We all have these manuals for everything. And without awareness, we just accept them as true. They're subconscious thoughts. We just accept them as true. The problem is that when this reality doesn't match with our manuals, instead of questioning the manual, we point fingers at other people. We blame the situation and the circumstance. We may blame ourselves and feel like failures and beat ourselves up. Again, we weren't taught to question our own beliefs. And this is a huge part of coaching. And what I do is helping you with that awareness. It isn't as important about where these thoughts come from. Sometimes that's part of the process because it might be attached to other things, but it's simply the awareness of like, oh, when I text somebody, my expectation is that they will respond in this amount of time, in this manner. When I ask somebody a question, this is the kind of response I want. And it's okay to have expectations. It's okay to want things from other people. But again, it's having the awareness that these are your thoughts. And the flip side is every person that you interact with has their own manual. They have a manual for you. They have a manual for the situation as well. And it's not going to be exactly the same as yours. Siblings that grow up in the same household, raised the same way by the same people, still interpret situations differently. Coworkers who have the same job and the same expectations still have different manuals. Every person has their own brain, and we forget about that autonomy and want everybody to think and respond exactly the way that we want them to. So another example, think about what is supposed to be going on in your house, tonight at 8 p.m. Where are you? If you have a partner, where's your partner? What are they doing? If you have kids, what are they doing? So you probably have a general routine and it's idealistic. But what happens when it doesn't look like that at all? And it's not your choice that your spouse is passed out on the couch. Nobody helped you with the dinner dishes. There's 3 loads of laundry to put away and the kids are bouncing off the walls. It isn't necessarily that that situation is wrong, but it doesn't match up with your manual. And when we have this cognitive dissonance, when the reality of our situation and how our brains want it to be, when those don't match up, that creates tension for us and into these thoughts and feelings, frustration, anger. You might be yelling. You might be passive aggressive. You might stonewall people and just walk away from the situation. When it's not going your way, take a moment and just consider your expectations. And remember that just because you think that this is the way it should be, doesn't necessarily make it true. Okay. That doesn't mean that your expectations are wrong, that you can't think about other people. They're just ideas. And sometimes we have to wonder, where did this come from? Are you expecting your kids to behave a certain way because the, Instagram highlights of somebody else make their house look perfect and that's the way you think kids should be? Or maybe you're just worn out and people are asking too much from you and therefore you want them to behave differently. The reality in that case is that it's your boundaries that aren't working. So a lot of times we have these manuals, these idealistic things. It might come from our childhood or our upbringing or religious beliefs or our work culture. It's all different filters that things come through to create what we think it should be. And again, we just haven't questioned it. And it might be that these things made sense a decade ago or even longer. It might be that it even made sense last week, but the situation has changed so drastically that it just isn't even possible. And so we cling to, it's not supposed to be this way. I don't like it. I don't want it. It shouldn't be like this. And that is not helping us. When we're in this tunnel vision of how something should be, of how another person should act or respond to us, we often are creating our own suffering. And that really sucks to hear. I get it. I was in this spiral for a long time. My life did not look like I wanted it to. There's times right now that if you would ask me 6, 7 years ago, that I would have no idea that this is my life right now. And from that perspective, that it shouldn't be this way. So I can be hanging on to these expectations, to these thoughts of all of the things that I think should be happening, of what my manual says a life should be for 46-year-old me with 2 kids and this job. But sometimes I need to just be aware and question, where is this coming from? Why do I think it should be this way? Is that true? Could something else be true? Why am I choosing to hang on to that thought that made sense 10 years ago when I was in a completely different situation, a completely different stage of life, when I had a, husband and a partner and life circumstances looked different than having 2 teenagers in the house. So when we create our own suffering, it's one thing to have a situation that you don't like, but thinking that there's something wrong with the other person or with yourself just adds a whole layer of junk on top of it. You don't have to like everything. You don't have to like the way people behave. You could want them to be different. Perfectly fine. When you start layering on the shoulds and the judgment, all of that is more clutter in your brain that you are overthinking, that you are creating more to think about and to deal with. Being stuck in our manuals that our way is the only way generally doesn't lend itself to asking questions, to problem solving, collaborating, or any sort of creativity. All of that gets blocked when it should be this one way. So what do? Do I just not have any expectations? No, you can still have expectations. And this is going to look different if you are a parent or an employer or a manager for people who are like literally underneath you and subordinates than it is going to be for friends or family members or a partner. And you just have to be aware, what are the dynamics in this relationship? What are my thoughts? Where is this coming from? And does this make sense for me right now in my life? Just because you saw something growing up from your parents or maybe from somebody else's parents and you think it shouldn't be like that, or this is how it should be. Maybe it's books that you read. Maybe it's just wanting a different life. And you have to think, where does this come from and how relevant is it? How does it serve me to keep hanging on to this? And this is a huge part of what we do in coaching. And I have been doing this work for years and years, and I still need a coach to remind me, Kristen, where'd that come from? Why are you thinking this is wrong? Why are you thinking that it should be different? Because I just get so caught up in my brain that this is true, and I forget to question. And that's fine. That's fine. That's our brain. But that is the power of coaching, that we can learn to catch ourselves more often. So the majority of the time, I am able to notice that about myself. But when something new happens or it's deep and it's an old childhood wound or whatever it might be, I don't see my own blind spots. So that's why I still need a coach. And that's why I encourage everybody to learn more about yourself, to have this awareness and this personal growth. And yes, to get a coach who can help you, because there's only so much that you can do on your own. But the things that you can do on your own, what we've talked about today, is just starting to recognize. You can notice this. And I would say start with situations or with relationships that aren't the closest to you, because this is intense if you're going to try and do it with your partner or your kids or some long-term important relationships to you. Start with an acquaintance or just what you think about how things should go on the weekends and the kinds of things that, you should do and not have to do. Or maybe it's with something at work and, how a supplier or a vendor is supposed to respond, or a customer, or whatever it is that you are doing in your work time. Start noticing these and start labeling that as your manual. And it's simply a matter of, oh, that's interesting. That's my manual. There's no judgment of yourself. You don't even have to dig into it right away. Simply labeling it as that's my manual. And then when you have time, you can journal, you can spend some more time thinking about it, whatever it is that you want to do to work it out. But that awareness is always our first step. So we all have these instruction manuals. We all have things that we think it should be, ways that people should behave, things that people shouldn't do about ourselves, about other people. All of that is normal. But you also have the power within your own mind to challenge some of those questions, to reconsider. Even if you've thought it for a really long time, it might just not make any sense right now. And you have the ability to change that. And if you need help, I would certainly love to work with you on that process. So thank you all for listening today. I am so excited to have this podcast, and I hope that you will subscribe and share and review this. And I will see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Stop Overthinking podcast with Kristen O'Dwyer. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who would benefit from the message. To learn more about working with me and links to social media and free resources, head over to my website, coachwithkristen.com. That's Kristen spelled Kristen. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss future episodes. Have a great week.